The church bench was cold, its polished wood biting into Lila's thighs as she sat, abandoned at 17. Her parents' parting words, "You're no daughter of ours," echoed like a hymn she couldn't unhear. She clutched her backpack, the only thing they'd left her, and stared at the stained glass window, its colors mocking her with promises of grace. Lila had always known she was different. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, Georgia, where Sunday sermons thundered with warnings of sin, she'd hidden her heart for years. She tried to pray away the feelings that stirred when she saw Emily, her best friend, laugh under the summer sun, her freckles dancing like constellations. But love, Lila learned, was not a thing you could bury. When her parents found her journal, filled with poems about Emily's smile, they didn't ask questions. They didn't yell. They just drove her to the church, left her on that bench, and walked away. The town clock struck noon, its chime heavy in the empty sanctuary. Lila's stomach growled, but she had no money, no plan, no home. She was a ghost in a place that preached salvation but offered her none. Her hazel eyes, red from crying, scanned the pews, searching for something, anything to hold on to. That's when the door creaked open and Clara stepped in. Clara Bennett, 33, was no stranger to Willow Creek's whispers. A painter who'd returned to her hometown after a decade in Atlanta, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that unsettled the town's rigid norms. Her short, wavy black hair framed a face that held stories of loss and triumph, and her brown eyes saw more than most. She'd come to the church that day to sketch the old organ, but what she found was Lila, curled into herself like a wounded bird. "You okay, kid?" Clara's voice was soft, like a melody you didn't know you needed until it played. Lila flinched, expecting judgment, but Clara's gaze held no condemnation. She sat beside her, not too close, and waited. Silence was Clara's gift. She knew it could unlock more than words. I don't have anywhere to go," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. "My parents, they found out she couldn't say it." The word lesbian felt like a brand in this place. Clara nodded, as if she'd heard the story before. "You don't have to explain." "Not to me." She reached into her bag, pulled out a thermos, and poured Lila a cup of coffee. "Drink. It's not much, but it's warm." Lila's hands trembled as she took the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, grounding her. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked, suspicion lacing her tone. In Willow Creek, kindness often came with strings. Clara smiled, a small sad curve of her lips. "Because I've been where you are. Not the same, but close enough." She didn't elaborate, but her eyes told Lila she wasn't alone. For the first time in hours, Lila breathed. They talked until the light through the stained glass shifted to dusk. Clara learned Lila was a poet, a dreamer who loved books but had never left Willow Creek. Lila learned Clara was an artist, single and unafraid of the town's side eye. When Clara offered her a place to stay, "Just until you figure things out," Lila hesitated. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But the alternative was the street, so she followed Clara to her small, colorful house on the edge of town. Clara's home was a world apart from the sterile order of Lila's childhood. Canvases leaned against walls, bursting with vibrant abstracts. Books spilled from shelves and a record player spun soft jazz. It felt like a place where secrets could breathe. That night, Lila slept on a pull-out couch, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of lavender. She dreamed of Emily, but for the first time the dream didn't end in shame. The next morning, Clara made pancakes, humming as she flipped them. "You don't owe me anything," she said, setting a plate in front of Lila. "But if you want to stay, you can. No strings." Lila stared at the pancakes, her throat tight. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Clara leaned against the counter, her gaze steady. "Because someone helped me once. And because you're not a sin, Lila. You're a person." Those words cracked something open in Lila. She didn't cry. She'd spent all her tears on the church bench, but she felt a spark of something new. Hope maybe. Or defiance. She wasn't sure. But as she ate, she stole glances at Clara, who moved with an ease that made the world feel less heavy. There was something about her. Something that made Lila's heart stutter in a way she hadn't felt since Emily. Days turned into weeks. Lila stayed, helping Clara with chores, reading her books, and writing poems in a new journal Clara gave her. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of heartbreak and dreams. Clara told Lila about her first love, a woman named Sarah, who'd left her for a normal life. Lila confessed her crush on Emily, and how it had cost her everything. They laughed, they argued, they healed. And slowly, without either of them naming it, something grew between them. One evening as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Lila's hand brushed Clara's. Neither pulled away. The air felt charged like the moment before a storm. Lila's heart raced, but she didn't dare speak. Clara turned to her, her eyes soft but searching. "You're stronger than you know, Lila," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lila wanted to say something, anything, but words failed her. Instead, she leaned closer and Clara didn't move away. The space between them shrank, and for a moment, the world was just the two of them, bathed in the glow of a Georgia summer night. But Willow Creek was watching. Small towns never sleep, and gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Lila's parents hadn't left town. They were pillars of the church, and their shame was now a public crusade. Whispers reached Lila. Her parents were rallying the congregation, calling her a lost soul, and Clara a predator. The town's judgment was a noose, tightening around their fragile bond. Lila overheard the rumors at the grocery store, where stares followed her like shadows. She came home shaken, her journal clutched to her chest. "They're saying things about you," she told Clara, her voice trembling. "Because of me." Clara's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "Let them talk. They don't get to decide who we are." But Lila wasn't so sure. She'd lost one home already. Could she survive losing another? The whispers grew louder, clawing at Lila's resolve. Willow Creek streets, once familiar, now felt like a maze of accusing eyes. Every glance from a neighbor, every hushed conversation, reminded her she was an outcast. Clara, though, was a shield. She taught Lila to ignore the stares, to hold her head high. "They're scared of what they don't understand," she said one morning over coffee. "And they don't understand us." Her smile was a lifeline, but Lila couldn't shake the fear that she was dragging Clara down with her. Lila found solace in writing. Her new journal filled with poems, some about Emily, others about Clara's laugh, the way her hands moved when she painted. Clara encouraged her, reading each poem with a reverence that made Lila blush. "You've got a gift," Clara said, taping one of Lila's poems to the fridge. "Don't hide it." But hiding was all Lila knew. At 19, she was still learning who she was outside her parents' shadow. Clara, at 35, seemed so sure of herself, a beacon in the storm. Lila envied her strength but feared she'd never match it. Their evenings on the porch became a ritual, a safe space where Lila could be herself. One night, under a blanket of stars, Clara shared more of her past. "I was 22 when I came out," she said, her voice low. "My family didn't kick me out, but they made it clear I wasn't welcome. I moved to Atlanta, built a life. It wasn't easy, but it was mine." She looked at Lila, her eyes fierce. "You'll build yours too." Lila wanted to believe her, but the town's judgment was relentless. At the local diner, a woman she'd known since childhood refused to serve her. "We don't cater to your kind," she'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lila fled, humiliated, and didn't tell Clara. She couldn't bear the thought of Clara fighting her battles. But Clara noticed. She always did. That evening she found Lila curled up on the couch, her journal untouched. "What happened?" she asked, sitting beside her. Lila broke, spilling the story through tears. Clara listened, her face a mix of anger and sorrow. "You don't deserve this," she said, pulling Lila into a hug. It was the first time they'd touched like that, and Lila felt a warmth she hadn't known she could feel. Clara's arms were a sanctuary, but they also stirred something deeper, a longing Lila wasn't ready to name. The next day, Clara took Lila to Atlanta for a change of scenery. The city was a revelation. Vibrant, loud, alive. They wandered through art galleries, ate street food, and laughed until their sides hurt. For the first time, Lila felt free. At a small bookstore, Clara bought her a collection of Sappho's poems. "She was like us," Clara said, her eyes twinkling. "Loving women, writing about it, no shame." Lila clutched the book, her heart swelling. She wanted to tell Clara how much she meant to her, how her presence made the world bearable. But fear held her back. What if Clara didn't feel the same? What if she was just being kind? Back in Willow Creek, the tension escalated. Lila's parents filed a petition with the church, demanding Clara's home be declared a place of moral corruption. The news spread and Clara's art commissions dried up. Lila overheard Clara on the phone, pleading with the gallery owner to keep her work. "I'm not what they say," Clara said, her voice breaking. Guilt consumed Lila. She started pulling away, skipping their porch talks, burying herself in her poems. Clara noticed, but she gave Lila space, sensing her turmoil. One night, Lila found a note under her door. "You're not a burden. You're a gift. See." The note broke Lila's defenses. She found Clara in her studio, surrounded by half-finished paintings. "I'm sorry," Lila said, tears streaming. "I'm ruining your life." Clara set down her brush, her eyes fierce. "You're not ruining anything. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years." The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Lila stepped closer, her heart pounding. Clara didn't move, but her gaze softened, inviting. Lila kissed her. It was tentative, trembling, but Clara kissed her back, slow and sure. The world fell away, leaving only the warmth of their lips, the promise of something real. When they pulled apart, Clara rested her forehead against Lila's. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "Together." But the town wasn't done with them. The next morning, a brick shattered Clara's studio window, a note tied to it. "Leave or pay." Lila's scream brought Clara running, and when she saw the note, her face hardened. "This ends now," she said, grabbing her keys. Clara drove to the church, Lila beside her, terrified but resolute. The congregation was gathered for a meeting, and Clara stormed in, holding the note aloft. "This is what you call faith?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Threatening a 19-year-old girl and the woman who took her in?" Lila's parents stood, their faces cold. "You're corrupting her," her mother said. "She was fine until you." "She was abandoned," Clara shot back. "By you. And I'd rather be damned than let her think she's anything less than perfect." The room fell silent. Lila's heart swelled, but fear lingered. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The church confrontation lit a fuse in Willow Creek. The town split, some rallied behind Clara, moved by her courage. Others doubled down, painting her and Lila as threats to their way of life. Lila felt the weight of every stare, every whisper, but Clara's hand in hers was an anchor. They returned to Clara's house, the broken window a stark reminder of the town's wrath. Clara boarded it up, her movements precise but tense. "We need a plan," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't stay here forever. Not like this." Lila nodded, but her mind was a storm. She loved Clara. Loved her in a way that felt like poetry, raw and unfiltered. But love wasn't enough to stop a town's hate. She spent nights writing, her journal filling with fears and dreams. One poem, titled Clara, spoke of a woman who painted light into shadows. She didn't show it to Clara, not yet. Felt too vulnerable, too true. Clara, meanwhile, was fighting her own battles. Her art, once celebrated, was now shunned by local galleries. She started selling online, but the income wasn't enough. Lila offered to get a job, but Clara shook her head. "You focus on you," she said. "Right. Dream. That's your power." Lila tried, but guilt gnawed at her. She saw the strain in Clara's eyes, the way her smile faltered when she thought Lila wasn't looking. One afternoon, Lila found Clara staring at a blank canvas, her hands still. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Clara admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not here." Lila's heart sank. "Are you saying we should leave?" Clara looked at her, eyes soft but resolute. "I'm saying we deserve a place where we can breathe." The idea of leaving terrified Lila. Willow Creek was all she'd ever known, even if it had rejected her. But the thought of staying, of watching Clara's spirit dim, was worse. They started planning, researching cities where they could start over: Portland, Austin, maybe San Francisco. Places where love didn't have to hide. But leaving wasn't simple. Lila had no ID, no birth certificate. Her parents had kept everything. Clara made calls, trying to navigate the legal maze, but bureaucracy was slow. And the town's hostility grew. Flyers appeared, calling for a cleansing of Willow Creek. Lila's parents led the charge, their voices amplified by the church's pulpit. One night, a group gathered outside Clara's house, shouting slurs. Lila hid in the bedroom, trembling, while Clara stood at the door, unafraid. "You want to hate us?" she called out. "Fine. But you don't get to scare us. The crowd dispersed, but the message was clear. They weren't safe. Lila couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of Clara getting hurt. She wrote a poem that night, her words sharp with anger and love. When Clara read it the next morning, she cried. "You're my home, Lila," she said, pulling her close. "No matter where we go." Their bond deepened, but so did the danger. A local reporter, sympathetic to their story, offered to write an article exposing the town's bigotry. Clara hesitated. She didn't want pity, but Lila saw a chance to fight back. "Let's tell our story," she said. "Not theirs." The article hit like a bomb. Titled Love in the Face of Hate, it detailed Lila's abandonment and Clara's compassion, painting them as heroes, not sinners. It went viral, shared across social media. Support poured in: letters, donations, offers of help from strangers. But so did threats. Clara's email filled with venom, and Lila's parents vowed to sue for defamation. The pressure was crushing, but it also brought Lila and Clara closer. They spent evenings dreaming of a future beyond Willow Creek, a place where they could love without fear. One night, as they lay on the couch, Lila traced Clara's palm with her finger. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. Clara kissed her forehead. "We already are." But the town had one last blow. Lila's parents filed for a restraining order, claiming Clara was a danger to their daughter. The court date loomed, a dark cloud over their fragile hope. Lila, now 19, was legally an adult, but her parents' influence ran deep. The judge was a churchgoer, a friend of her father's. Clara hired a lawyer, but the odds were stacked against them. The night before the hearing, Lila couldn't sleep. She found Clara in the kitchen, staring at a photo of them from their Atlanta trip, smiling under a neon sign. "If we lose," Lila whispered, "what happens to us?" Clara took her hand, her grip firm. "We fight. We always fight." The courtroom was a battlefield of hushed voices and stern faces. Lila sat beside Clara, her heart pounding as the judge, a gray-haired man with a cross pinned to his lapel, reviewed the case. Her parents sat across the room, their eyes cold, unyielding. Lila felt like she was 17 again, abandoned on that church bench. Clara's lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, argued fiercely. "Lila is an adult," she said. "She chose to live with Clara, who provided shelter when her parents cast her out. This restraining order is a ploy to control her, not protect her." Rachel presented the viral article, letters of support, and Lila's journal entries, painting a picture of love and resilience. Lila's parents' lawyer countered with venom. "Clara Bennett has corrupted a vulnerable young woman, leading her into a sinful lifestyle. This is about saving Lila's soul." The words stung, but Lila held Clara's hand under the table, drawing strength from her warmth. When Lila was called to speak, her knees shook, but Clara's nod gave her courage. "I'm not lost," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I was abandoned because I love women. Clara didn't corrupt me. She saved me. She showed me I'm not a sin. I'm a person." The courtroom fell silent, and Clara's eyes shone with pride. The judge deliberated for an agonizing hour. When he returned, his ruling was a compromise. No restraining order, but he urged Lila to reconcile with her parents. It wasn't a victory, but it was freedom. Lila and Clara left the courthouse hand in hand, the weight of Willow Creek lifting slightly. Back home, they celebrated quietly, cooking dinner and dancing to jazz in the living room. Lila felt bold, alive. She read Clara her poem Clara, her voice steady despite her nerves. When she finished, Clara was silent, tears streaming down her face. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said, pulling Lila into a kiss that felt like a promise. But freedom came with a cost. The article had made them targets. Hate mail arrived daily, and Clara's car was vandalized. Lila's parents didn't relent, spreading lies that Clara was a predator. The town's division deepened, with some residents leaving flowers at Clara's door, others spray painting slurs on her fence. Lila and Clara decided to leave Willow Creek. They chose Portland, drawn to its vibrant queer community and art scene. Clara sold her house, and Lila applied for a poetry program at a community college. They packed their lives into a van, their dreams outweighing their fears. The night before they left, they sat on the porch one last time watching fireflies. "I'm scared," Lila admitted, her hand in Clara's. What if we're not enough for the world? Clara squeezed her hand. We're enough for each other. That's where it starts. The drive to Portland was a journey of hope and healing. They stopped at roadside diners, laughed over flat tires, and shared stories under starry skies. Lila wrote poems in the passenger seat, her words freer, bolder. Clara sketched her, capturing the spark in her hazel eyes. They were building something new together. In Portland, they found a small apartment above a bookstore. The city embraced them. Pride flags lined the streets and strangers smiled without judgment. Lila enrolled in her program, her poems winning praise from her professors. Clara's art flourished, her paintings selling in local galleries. They built a life, not without challenges, but with love as their foundation. One evening at a poetry reading, Lila shared a new piece about a girl left on a church bench, found by a woman who saw her heart. The audience wept and Clara in the front row clapped loudest. Afterward they walked home, the city lights reflecting in their eyes. I love you, Lila said, the words no longer scary. I love you too, Clara replied, her smile brighter than the stars. But Willow Creek's shadow lingered. A letter arrived from Lila's mother, begging her to come home and be fixed. Lila tore it up, but the words lingered, a reminder of the pain she'd left behind. Portland was a new chapter, but healing wasn't linear. Lila carried her past like a scar, visible only in quiet moments. Clara too bore wounds. Years of rejection had taught her to guard her heart, even as she gave it to Lila. They built routines. Mornings with coffee and poetry, evenings with paint and music. Lila's poems grew bolder, weaving stories of love and defiance. Clara's art became a mirror, reflecting their journey in vibrant hues. They found friends, queer artists, writers, dreamers, who welcomed them without question. For the first time, Lila felt like she belonged. But the past wasn't done. One day, Lila's father showed up at their apartment, his face gaunt, his eyes pleading. We made a mistake, he said. We want you back. Lila stood frozen, her heart torn. Clara stayed by her side, silent but steady. I'm not broken, Lila said, her voice firm. I'm happy. I'm loved. You don't get to take that away. Her father left, defeated, and Lila cried in Clara's arms. Not for loss, but for the strength it took to choose herself. The rejection gave Lila clarity. She proposed to Clara on a rainy Portland evening, under an umbrella in a park. You're my home, she said, offering a simple silver ring. Clara laughed through tears, saying yes before the question was fully asked. Their wedding was small, surrounded by their chosen family, with poetry and art as their vows. Years passed. Lila published a poetry collection, dedicated to Clara, that became a quiet sensation in queer circles. Clara's paintings hung in galleries across the country, each one a love letter to their life. They never returned to Willow Creek, but they carried its lessons. Love is a rebellion and home is where you're seen. One night, Lila found an old journal from Willow Creek, its pages filled with pain and hope. She wrote a final poem titled Daughter Not Sin, and read it to Clara. It spoke of a girl left behind, found by a woman who saw her worth. You saved me, Lila said, her voice thick with emotion. Clara shook her head. You saved yourself. I just held the light. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. In a world that tried to break them, they built a life of love, art, and truth. And every night, as they fell asleep, they knew they were enough. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.